The storm before the storm. Angela Johnson's hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, knuckles whitening under the strain. The rain lashed against her windshield like a relentless barrage, turning the night into a swirling chaos of dark shadows and distorted lights. The storm outside mirrored the turbulence brewing inside her. She was exhausted, her body aching from the day's demands at work. As an FBI agent, she often dealt with high-stress cases, but tonight's storm felt different, more personal. Her small sedan, usually a refuge of comfort, felt like a confined space now, amplifying every drop of rain and every beat of her anxious heart. Angela's mind raced, replaying the events of the day and the cases she had worked on. The familiar hum of the engine and the steady rhythm of the windshield wipers were her only companions in this dark, empty stretch of road. The quietness of the small town she was passing through was eerie, almost unnatural. The streets were deserted, and the few buildings that lined the road seemed to slouch under the weight of the storm. It was as if the town had retreated into itself, leaving Angela alone with her thoughts and the ominous feeling that something was wrong. A sudden shiver ran down her spine as a pair of headlights pierced through the rain-soaked darkness. Angela's breath caught in her throat as she glanced in her rearview mirror. The distant glow of a police car's flashing lights grew closer, casting an unsettling red and blue hue over her car's interior. Her instincts, honed from years of navigating dangerous situations, told her that this was no ordinary traffic stop. Despite her exhaustion, her senses were heightened. She noticed the police car was not just following her, but maintaining a close distance, its lights pulsing steadily. Angela's grip on the steering wheel tightened, and her pulse quickened. The rational part of her mind told her that she had done nothing wrong. She had been driving within the speed limit and following all traffic laws. But the fear of what could happen next, especially given the current political climate and her own experiences, gnawed at her. Angela's thoughts raced as she weighed her options. Should she pull over and calmly explain her situation, or should she keep driving and hope that the officer would eventually back off? The rain intensified, making it harder to see the road ahead and adding to the tension in the car. The steady drumming of the rain on the roof seemed to echo the pounding of her heart. When the police siren blared, Angela's heart skipped a beat. The sound was sharp and jarring, cutting through the storm's roar. She knew she had no choice but to pull over. Her mind was a flurry of conflicting emotions, fear, anger, and a deep-seated anxiety about what lay ahead. She took a deep breath, trying to steady her racing heart. Angela had faced dangerous situations before, but this felt different. It felt personal, and that scared her more than anything. The rain continued to pelt down as she maneuvered her car to the side of the road, the streetlights casting eerie shadows that danced across the pavement. As the car came to a stop, the police car's lights illuminated the night with an ominous red and blue glow. Angela's hands trembled slightly as she kept her eyes on the side mirror, watching as the officer's car came to a halt behind her. The door opened with a creak and a figure stepped out. Angela's breath hitched as she saw the officer's stern, determined expression. She had heard whispers about Officer Mark Henderson, a hardliner with a reputation for being particularly harsh towards black people. The stories she had heard made her stomach churn. Henderson's footsteps were heavy and deliberate as he approached her vehicle. Even through the rain, Angela could see the rigid set of his shoulders and the grim set of his jaw. His hand rested on the holster of his gun, a clear signal that he was not here for a friendly chat. The intensity of his gaze sent a chill down Angela's spine. Angela forced herself to stay calm as Henderson reached her window and tapped on the glass with his flashlight. The rain pounded relentlessly, and the sound of the droplets hitting the roof seemed to amplify the tension. Angela rolled down the window, the cold night air rushing in, mingling with the sound of the rain. "License and registration," Henderson barked, his voice dripping with hostility. Angela nodded, her fingers moving slowly and deliberately to retrieve her documents from her purse. She was acutely aware of every movement, trying to avoid giving Henderson any reason to perceive her as a threat. As she handed him her license and registration, she met his gaze directly. Her expression was composed, showing no sign of the fear she felt inside. Henderson barely glanced at the documents before his eyes narrowed, filled with suspicion and contempt. "What are you doing in this town?" he demanded, his tone sharp and accusatory. "You're not from around here." Angela's heart skipped a beat, but she kept her voice steady. "I'm just passing through, heading home after work," she replied. Henderson's eyes narrowed further, his skepticism evident. "Work, huh? And what kind of work do you do?" he sneered, clearly not believing that she could have a legitimate job. "I'm an FBI agent," Angela said, her voice firm but without any hint of arrogance. She wasn't trying to flaunt her position, but she hoped it might make the tipping point. The rain fell harder, turning the darkened street into a blur of indistinguishable shapes. The rhythmic pounding against the pavement created an almost hypnotic backdrop to the confrontation unfolding between Angela Johnson and Officer Mark Henderson. Angela's heart pounded not just from the physical exertion, but from the sheer gravity of the situation. Each raindrop felt like a symbol of the storm that had erupted both outside and within her. Henderson's grip on Angela's arm was unyielding. The roughness of his hands contrasted sharply with the cold rain, which was now streaming down both their faces. Angela tried to focus on controlling her breathing, her mind racing with thoughts of what might happen next. Her training as an FBI agent had taught her to remain calm in high-pressure situations, but this was different. This was not a tactical maneuver or a criminal case. It was a personal confrontation, and she felt the weight of every injustice she had ever faced. "Officer," Angela said, her voice strained but determined, "you're violating my rights. I am not resisting arrest. I'm merely trying to understand why you're treating me this way." Her attempt at diplomacy was met with Henderson's cold, unyielding glare. "Stave it," Henderson snapped, his face inches from hers. "I don't want to hear your excuses. You think you're special just because you have a badge. Around here, the only badge that matters is mine." His words dripped with disdain, and Angela could feel the force of his anger like a tangible pressure against her chest. The stark injustice of the situation ignited a fiery resolve within Angela. She knew that this was not just about her. It was about every person who had been unfairly targeted, every injustice that had been overlooked. Angela had dedicated her life to fighting for justice, and she was not going to let her own rights be trampled in this moment of personal turmoil. Henderson's actions were becoming increasingly aggressive. His eyes, once cold and calculating, now burned with an almost primal rage. He pushed Angela harder against the car, the rain mixing with the sweat on their faces. Her shoulder throbbed with pain, but she forced herself to remain upright and composed. "Step out of the car." Henderson roared again, his voice echoing through the storm. The intensity of his command was matched by the intensity of the storm itself. Angela could barely hear anything else over the deafening roar of the rain and the pulsating siren of the police car behind them. Angela knew that she could not comply with Henderson's unlawful demand. To do so would be to surrender not only her physical freedom, but also her principles. She had always believed in standing up for what was right, even when it was the hardest thing to do. "Officer Henderson," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos around her, "I am asking you one more time. Please explain to me why you are treating me like this. I am an FBI agent, and I am only trying to get home." Henderson's face twisted with a sneer. "Your badge doesn't mean a damn thing to me," he spat. "You're just another person I have to deal with. And right now, you're pissing me off. So I'm telling you again, step out of the car or I'll make you regret it." As he finished speaking, Henderson's hand gripped the collar of Angela's hoodie, yanking it with a harsh pull. Angela's breath hitched as the fabric pulled painfully against her neck. She felt a surge of panic, but she forced herself to focus. She had to remain calm and collected to avoid escalating the situation further. In the midst of this confrontation, Angela noticed movement in the corner of her eye. The headlights of another car approached from the distance, their bright beams cutting through the rain. For a brief moment, Henderson's attention wavered as he looked over his shoulder. Angela seized the opportunity to speak louder. "Someone is coming. We need to address this situation properly," she called out, her voice rising above the noise of the storm. The approaching vehicle was a beacon of hope, a potential witness to the injustice unfolding. The new car slowed down as it neared, its headlights illuminating the scene. The driver, a middle-aged man with a concerned expression, slowed to a stop, his gaze shifting between Angela and Henderson. The presence of a potential witness seemed to give Henderson pause. His anger was still palpable, but there was a flicker of hesitation in his eyes. Henderson's grip on Angela's collar loosened slightly as he turned his attention to the new arrival. "What do you want?" he barked at the man. His tone was less aggressive now, but still laced with hostility. "I saw what was happening," the man said, his voice steady but cautious. "I thought I'd check if everything was okay. Looks like there's some sort of problem here." Angela took a deep breath, seizing the opportunity to address the bystander. "Sir, I am an FBI agent being unlawfully detained by Officer Henderson here. I haven't broken any laws and I am being mistreated. Can you please call for backup or a supervisor?" The man's expression shifted to one of concern as he pulled out his phone. "I'm calling for help right now," he said, his voice filled with urgency. He began dialing, his eyes never leaving the tense scene. Henderson's demeanor changed slightly as he saw the man on the phone. The realization that there were now witnesses to his actions seemed to temper his aggression. He stepped back slightly, his grip on Angela's arm loosening. The rain continued to pour down, soaking everyone present, but the presence of another observer had changed the dynamic. Angela seized the moment to try to ease the tension. She continued to maintain her composure, even as her shoulder throbbed and her body ached from the rough handling. "Officer Henderson, I need you to calm down and explain what's going on. I am not a criminal, and I have been nothing but respectful. This situation is escalating unnecessarily." Henderson's face was a mixture of frustration and begrudging acknowledgement. He was clearly struggling with the realization that his actions were under scrutiny. Fine, he said begrudgingly. We'll wait for backup, but don't think this is over. Angela watched as Henderson retreated slightly, his body language showing a mix of anger and uncertainty. The rain continued to fall, the storm showing no signs of letting up. Angela felt a flicker of hope as the headlights of the approaching car cast a warm glow over the scene, signaling that help might be on the way. The middle-aged man remained at a distance, his phone pressed to his ear as he spoke with someone. Angela could hear snippets of the conversation, requests for a supervisor and concerns about the situation. The sound of the rain and the occasional thunder seemed to provide a solemn soundtrack to the unfolding drama. As the minutes ticked by, Angela's thoughts raced. She wondered what would happen next and whether her insistence on standing up for her rights would lead to a resolution or further complications. The storm outside felt like a metaphor for the storm within her, a turbulent, chaotic force that was pushing her to confront the injustice head-on. Finally, the sound of sirens pierced through the rain, growing louder as they approached. Angela could see the flashing lights of additional police vehicles in the distance, their red and blue hues cutting through the darkness. A mixture of relief and apprehension washed over her. The arrival of additional officers could mean a resolution, but it could also mean more confrontation. As the new officers arrived and began to assess the situation, Angela knew that the outcome of this night would depend on how the additional authorities handled the situation. Her ordeal was far from over, but she hoped that the presence of witnesses and higher-ranking officials would bring some measure of justice to this night of unrelenting storm and tension. The rain continued to fall, washing over everything with a relentless intensity. For Angela Johnson, this storm was more than just a weather phenomenon. It was a crucible, testing her resolve and her commitment to standing up for what was right, even in the face of overwhelming adversity. The rising tide. The arrival of additional police vehicles brought a mixed sense of relief and trepidation for Angela Johnson. As the siren's wail diminished to a low hum, the scene at the side of the rain-soaked road began to take on a new dynamic. The headlights of the incoming patrol cars cut through the storm, casting long shadows that danced across the asphalt. Angela could see the new officers emerging from their vehicles, their expressions a blend of curiosity and concern. Henderson, who had been seething with anger, now stood aside, his posture rigid and defensive. The arrival of these new officers was both a potential opportunity and a threat, a chance for intervention or a possible escalation, depending on how the situation was handled. The first officer to approach was a tall, lean woman with a commanding presence. She carried herself with an air of authority that seemed to diffuse some of the tension in the air. Her gaze swept over Angela and Henderson before settling on the middle-aged man who had stopped to help. "What's the situation here?" the officer asked, her voice firm yet calm. She was taking in the scene, noting the rain-drenched figures and the uneasy standoff. The middle-aged man stepped forward, his face showing a mixture of relief and apprehension. "I saw this officer," he began, pointing towards Henderson, acting aggressively towards this woman. "She claims to be an FBI agent and has been asking why she's being treated this way." The female officer nodded, her expression thoughtful. "All right, I'll need to speak with both parties separately to get a clearer picture of what's going on." She glanced at Angela, her eyes filled with empathy. "Please stay here for a moment while I speak with Officer Henderson." Angela watched as the officer approached Henderson, her demeanor a stark contrast to the hostility that had marked his earlier behavior. Henderson's shoulders were slumped slightly, his face a mix of frustration and begrudging acknowledgement. Angela's mind raced as she waited, her heart pounding with a mix of hope and apprehension. The rain continued to pour down, drumming on the patrol cars and creating a monotonous backdrop to the unfolding drama. Angela's thoughts turned inward as she tried to keep herself focused. She thought about the long hours she had worked, the cases she had solved, and the injustices she had encountered along the way. This night, however, felt like a significant turning point, a moment that could redefine her own sense of justice. As the female officer spoke with Henderson, Angela caught snippets of their conversation. The officer's tone was measured, and she seemed to be pressing Henderson for an explanation of his actions. Henderson's responses were clipped and defensive, and Angela could see that he was struggling to justify his behavior under the scrutiny of a more authoritative figure. After a few minutes, the female officer walked back to Angela, her expression thoughtful. "I'm Officer Williams," she introduced herself. "I understand you've been subjected to some undue treatment. I'd like to hear your side of the story." Angela took a deep breath, grateful for the opportunity to explain her perspective. "Thank you, Officer Williams. I'm Angela Johnson, an FBI agent. I was simply driving home after a long day at work. Officer Henderson stopped me and began treating me aggressively, despite the fact that I hadn't broken any laws." Officer Williams listened attentively, nodding as Angela spoke. "And you provided your license and registration to Officer Henderson?" Angela nodded. "Yes, I did. I tried to explain my situation, but his aggression only increased. I've been trying to comply with the law and not escalate the situation, but his behavior was beyond what was reasonable. Officer Williams' eyes softened with understanding. I appreciate you providing your account. I will need to take your statement and check your credentials to verify your claim. As Officer Williams began to take Angela's statement, the sound of additional sirens approached. The arrival of a supervisor and a few more officers brought a renewed sense of gravity to the situation. The new arrivals were more composed, their demeanor suggesting a higher level of experience and professionalism. Angela felt a mix of relief and anxiety as the situation continued to unfold. The supervisor, a middle-aged man with a stern yet approachable demeanor, approached Angela. I'm Sergeant Thompson, he introduced himself. I'm here to get clear understanding of what happened. Officer Williams has briefed me on the situation, but I'd like to hear your account directly. Angela nodded, feeling a sense of cautious optimism. Thank you, Sergeant Thompson. I'm Angela Johnson, an FBI agent. I was on my way home when Officer Henderson stopped me. Despite my compliance and providing my credentials, he treated me with undue aggression. I've done nothing wrong, and I'm asking for your help to resolve this situation. Sergeant Thompson listened carefully, taking notes as Angela spoke. He asked a few clarifying questions, seeking details about the interaction with Henderson and the circumstances leading up to it. Angela answered as clearly and thoroughly as possible, determined to provide a complete account of the evening's events. As the conversation with Sergeant Thompson concluded, Officer Williams approached Angela with a more relaxed demeanor. We'll need to verify your credentials and review the dashcam footage from the patrol car. In the meantime, I'll ensure that you're treated with the respect and fairness you deserve. Angela felt a surge of relief at Officer Williams' words. The promise of a thorough investigation and the acknowledgement of her mistreatment provided a glimmer of hope. The storm outside seemed to echo the tumult within her, but the presence of more responsible officers gave her a renewed sense of determination. Sergeant Thompson and Officer Williams turned their attention to Henderson, who had become increasingly subdued. The new officers began to review the situation, speaking with Henderson and examining the patrol car's dashcam footage. The tension in the air was palpable as they worked to piece together the full story. Angela remained at the side of the road, her mind racing with thoughts of the implications of this night's events. The rain continued to pour, the storm a relentless reminder of the struggle she was enduring. She knew that the outcome of this situation could have far-reaching consequences, both for herself and for the broader fight for justice. As the investigation proceeded, the storm began to show signs of abating. The rain lightened to a steady drizzle, and the once dark sky began to show faint signs of dawn. The changing weather mirrored the shifting dynamics of the situation, a gradual move from chaos towards resolution. After a considerable period of time, Sergeant Thompson approached Angela with a thoughtful expression. We've reviewed the footage and spoken with Officer Henderson. Based on our findings, it's clear that his behavior was not appropriate. We will be taking appropriate action to address this matter. Angela felt a mix of relief and exhaustion. The knowledge that Henderson's actions would be scrutinized and that corrective measures would be taken provided some measure of justice. However, the toll of the night's events had left her feeling drained and emotionally spent. As the first light of dawn began to break through the storm clouds, Angela prepared to leave the scene. Officer Williams approached her once more, offering a reassuring smile. Thank you for your patience and cooperation tonight. If you need any further assistance or support, please don't hesitate to reach out. Angela nodded, her gratitude evident. Thank you, Officer Williams. I appreciate your help. As Angela drove away, the remnants of the storm gradually fading behind her, she reflected on the events of the night. The experience had been a harrowing test of her resilience and commitment to justice. She knew that the fight for fairness and accountability was far from over, but she also knew that moments like these were crucial in paving the way for change. The road ahead was clearer now, both literally and metaphorically. Angela was ready to face whatever challenges lay in store, fortified by the knowledge that standing up for what was right was always worth the struggle. Echoes of justice. As Angela Johnson drove away from the scene, the storm had settled into a light drizzle, and the first rays of dawn began to pierce through the cloud-covered sky. The oppressive weight of the night's events slowly lifted, but Angela's mind was far from at ease. She had spent countless hours fighting for justice and fairness, yet this night's ordeal had been a stark reminder of how deeply systemic issues could penetrate, even for those who were sworn to uphold the law. Angela's home was still some distance away, and she used the time to reflect on the tumultuous night. The serene landscape outside, with its early morning calm and gentle light, stood in stark contrast to the chaos she had just experienced. Yet, as she drove, the images of Officer Henderson's aggressive demeanor and the harshness of the encounter replayed in her mind. The drive seemed to stretch on endlessly, each mile bringing a new wave of contemplation. Angela thought about her colleagues, her friends, and her family, people who relied on her strength and dedication. She knew that she would have to share her experience with them, but for now, she needed to process everything on her own. The calm of the early morning was both a balm and a reminder of the enduring work ahead. When Angela finally pulled into her driveway, the house was still quiet, save for the soft sounds of the waking day. A sense of relief at being home was palpable. She took a deep breath before stepping out of her car, feeling the weight of the night's events still lingering on her shoulders. Inside, her family was just beginning to stir. Her husband, Marcus, was making his usual morning coffee, and their two children, Jade and Malik, were getting ready for school. The normalcy of their morning routine was comforting, a stark contrast to the night Angela had endured. "Hey, Han." Marcus greeted her with a concerned look as he saw her entering the kitchen. "You're back early. How was your night?" Angela forced a smile, though her exhaustion was evident. "It was a rough night, but I'm okay. I'll explain everything in a bit. I just need to get a shower and some rest." Marcus, always perceptive, could sense that there was more to the story. He didn't press her, but gave her a comforting nod. "All right, you take your time. We're here for you." After a quick shower and a brief but heartfelt breakfast with her family, Angela retreated to her home office. The room was her sanctuary, a place where she could find solace amidst the chaos. As she sat at her desk, she pulled out her laptop and began drafting a report on the events of the night. It was crucial for her to document everything meticulously, not only for her own records but also for any potential investigations or legal actions that might arise. The process of writing was cathartic. Angela recounted every detail of the encounter with Officer Henderson, from the initial stop to the aggressive handling and her interactions with the new officers. She made sure to include her observations, her feelings, and the impact of the entire experience. As she typed, she could almost feel the tension releasing, the act of documenting serving as a way to process and make sense of the chaos. Once she completed the report, Angela sent it to her supervisor and a few trusted colleagues. The process of sharing her experience with those who understood the gravity of her situation was another step towards healing and ensuring that her story would not be overlooked. As the day progressed, Angela received a call from Sergeant Thompson. "Ms. Johnson, I want to follow up and thank you again for your cooperation and patience. We're taking the necessary steps to address the situation with Officer Henderson. Your report has been invaluable, and we're committed to ensuring that this matter is handled appropriately." Angela appreciated the call. "Thank you, Sergeant Thompson. I trust that the situation will be resolved fairly. I hope this will contribute to meaningful change." "Absolutely," Sergeant Thompson assured her. "We're committed to addressing these issues head-on. If you need anything further, please don't hesitate to reach out." The reassurance from Sergeant Thompson was a small but significant comfort. Angela knew that the wheels of justice were turning, but she also understood that change often took time and persistence. As she moved through the day, she remained focused on her work and her family, finding strength in the support they provided. Later that afternoon, Angela received a call from Officer Williams. "I just wanted to check in and see how you're doing," Williams said, her voice warm and genuine. Angela was touched by the gesture. "I'm doing better. Thank you. I appreciate your support and professionalism last night. It made a huge difference." "I'm glad to hear that," Officer Williams replied. "We're still reviewing the incident, and I'll make sure you're updated on any developments. It's important to us that this matter is handled with the utmost care." As the conversation ended, Angela felt a renewed sense of hope. The support from Officer Williams and Sergeant Thompson was a reminder that there were still dedicated individuals within the system who were committed to fairness and integrity. The evening came, and Angela sat down with her family to discuss the events of the day. She explained the details of the encounter, her interactions with the new officers, and the steps that were being taken to address the situation. Her family listened intently, their support and concern evident. "It's awful you had to go through that," Marcus said, his voice filled with empathy. "But I'm proud of how you handled it. You stood up for yourself and for what's right." Jade and Malik, though young, could sense the gravity of the situation. "Are you okay, Mom?" Jade asked, her voice soft. Angela smiled at her children, feeling a rush of gratitude for their presence. "I'm okay, sweetheart. It was a tough night, but I'm home now, and I'm surrounded by people who care about me. That means a lot." As the family gathered around for dinner, the atmosphere was one of warmth and solidarity. Angela found comfort in the simple acts of togetherness, the laughter and conversation providing a welcome distraction from the challenges of the day. Later that night, as she lay in bed, Angela reflected on the events that had unfolded. The encounter with Officer Henderson had been a stark reminder of the deep-seated issues that still plague society. Yet the support from her colleagues, the presence of witnesses, and the commitment to justice provided a glimmer of hope. Angela knew that her journey was far from over. The fight for justice was ongoing, and the struggle to address systemic issues required persistence and dedication. But as she closed her eyes, she felt a sense of resolve. She was committed to continuing her work, standing up for what was right, and to making a difference in a world that desperately needed it. The echoes of the night's events would remain with her, a constant reminder of the challenges she faced. But Angela was determined to turn those echoes into a force for change, a catalyst for reform, and a beacon of hope for others who faced similar struggles. As the night deepened and sleep began to claim her, Angela found solace in the knowledge that she was not alone in her fight. The journey ahead would be fraught with challenges, but she was ready to face them with unwavering courage and commitment. The dawn of a new day brought with it the promise of progress, and Angela was prepared to seize that promise with both hands, determined to forge a path toward justice and equality. Ripples of change. In the days that followed the confrontation with Officer Henderson, Angela Johnson found herself navigating a delicate balance between her professional responsibilities and the personal aftermath of the night's events. The ordeal had left her weary but resolute, and she was determined to ensure that the incident would not be brushed aside or forgotten. Her days were filled with meetings and casework, but her evenings were often dedicated to reflecting on the situation and strategizing about next steps. The ordeal had ignited a renewed sense of urgency in her. She knew that her personal experience was part of a larger narrative about justice, systemic racism, and the need for reform. One afternoon, Angela was invited to a local community meeting focused on police reform and community relations. The meeting was organized by a coalition of advocacy groups and was attended by local officials, activists, and concerned citizens. Angela saw this as an opportunity to share her experience, advocate for meaningful change, and contribute to a broader conversation about justice. As she entered the meeting hall, Angela was greeted by a sea of faces, some familiar, others new. The room was buzzing with conversation, the air thick with a mix of anticipation and concern. Angela spotted a few colleagues and friends in the crowd and made her way to a seat near the front. The meeting began with an overview of recent incidents and ongoing efforts to address issues of police misconduct and racial inequality. The speakers included activists who had dedicated their lives to fighting for justice, as well as local officials who were working to implement reforms. Angela listened attentively, taking in the range of perspectives and the breadth of the discussion. When it was her turn to speak, Angela took a deep breath and approached the podium. The room fell silent, the attendees waiting to hear her story. Angela could feel the weight of her experience pressing down on her, but she steeled herself, knowing that her voice could contribute to the larger dialogue. "Thank you for the opportunity to speak today," Angela began, her voice steady. "My name is Angela Johnson, and I am an FBI agent. I'm here to share an experience that I believe highlights some critical issues within our system and to advocate for the changes that are so desperately needed." Angela recounted the details of the night's events, her encounter with Officer Henderson, the aggressive behavior she had faced, and the subsequent intervention by Sergeant Thompson and Officer Williams. She spoke candidly about her feelings of fear, frustration, and hope, emphasizing that her experience was not an isolated incident but part of a broader pattern that needed to be addressed. As she spoke, the room was filled with a palpable sense of engagement. Attendees listened intently, their expressions a mixture of empathy and determination. Angela's story resonated with many, and her call for accountability and reform was met with nods of agreement and murmurs of support. After her speech, Angela was approached by several individuals who wanted to offer their support or discuss potential actions. Some were community leaders interested in collaborating on advocacy efforts, while others were citizens eager to learn more about how they could contribute to the cause. Among those who approached her was a local journalist named Emily Carter. Emily was known for her investigative reporting on issues of social justice and had been following the ongoing conversations about police reform. She was eager to interview Angela for an article she was writing on recent incidents of police misconduct and the need for systemic change. Angela agreed to the interview, recognizing the importance of bringing her story to a wider audience. Over the next few days, she met with Emily, discussing the details of the incident and the broader implications for the community. Emily's questions were thoughtful, and Angela appreciated her commitment to uncovering the truth and advocating for justice. The resulting article was published online and in the local newspaper, generating significant attention and sparking conversations throughout the community. The piece highlighted Angela's experience, the ongoing issues with police misconduct, and the need for meaningful reforms. They also included calls to action, encouraging readers to engage with local advocacy groups and support initiatives aimed at addressing systemic issues. In the weeks that followed, Angela continued to be involved in community discussions and advocacy efforts. She participated in forums, panels, and meetings, using her experience to shed light on the challenges faced by marginalized communities and to push for tangible changes within the system. Her efforts were not without challenges. There were moments of resistance and pushback from those who were reluctant to acknowledge the need for change. Some individuals and groups were defensive, clinging to outdated views or seeking to discredit the calls for reform. Angela faced these challenges with resilience, understanding that progress often came with resistance and that persistence was key. Despite the obstacles, there were also signs of progress. Local officials began to propose new policies aimed at increasing transparency and accountability within the police department. Community organizations rallied around the cause, organizing rallies, workshops, and educational events to raise awareness and advocate for change. Angela found solace and strength in the collective efforts of those around her. The support from her family, friends, and colleagues provided a foundation of encouragement and solidarity. The sense of community and shared purpose was a powerful reminder that change was possible and that every voice mattered. One evening, as Angela reviewed some new policy proposals and community feedback, she received a call from Sergeant Thompson. "Ms. Johnson," he began, "I wanted to update you on the progress we've made regarding the situation with Officer Henderson." Angela listened intently as Sergeant Thompson detailed the actions taken in response to the incident. "We've conducted a thorough review of the case and have implemented new training protocols for officers to address issues of bias and aggression. We're also working on establishing a community oversight committee to provide additional accountability." Angela felt a surge of hope as she listened to the updates. "Thank you for the information, Sergeant Thompson. I appreciate the efforts being made to address these issues. It's a step in the right direction." "I'm glad to hear that," Sergeant Thompson replied. "Your experience has played a crucial role in driving these changes. Your courage and advocacy have made a significant impact." As the conversation ended, Angela felt a sense of accomplishment and gratitude. The road to reform was still long and winding, but the steps taken in the aftermath of her experience were a testament to the power of persistence and the collective efforts of those dedicated to justice. The days continued to bring both challenges and triumphs. Angela remained actively involved in advocacy and community efforts, and her story continued to inspire others to stand up for what was right. The conversation she had started and the changes she had helped to initiate were ripples in a larger movement, a movement towards a more just and equitable society. As she looked back on the journey, Angela knew that the work was far from over. The fight for justice and equality was ongoing, and there were always more battles to be fought. But she also understood that every step taken, every voice raised, and every act of courage contributed to a greater cause. The dawn of each new day brought with it new opportunities and challenges. Angela was ready to face them with the same resolve and determination that had guided her through the darkest hours. The journey was a testament to her commitment to justice, her belief in the power of change, and her unwavering dedication to making a difference in the world. The path forward. The ripples of Angela Johnson's courageous stand against injustice continued to expand across her community and beyond. As the weeks turned into months, the focus on police reform and systemic change gained momentum, driven by the collective efforts of advocates, activists, and ordinary citizens. Angela remained at the forefront of these efforts, her experience serving as both a catalyst for discussion and a beacon of hope. One crisp autumn morning, Angela was invited to speak at a national conference on law enforcement and social justice. The conference, held in Washington, D.C., brought together leaders from various sectors, law enforcement, government, academia, and civil society, to discuss and develop strategies for meaningful reform. Angela saw this as an invaluable opportunity to share her story on a larger stage and to contribute to shaping policies that could impact communities across the nation. As she prepared for her keynote address, Angela reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. The personal and professional challenges she had faced, the support from her community and colleagues, and the ongoing efforts for reform had all played a role in shaping her perspective. The weight of responsibility was palpable, but so was the sense of purpose driving her forward. The day of the conference arrived, and Angela took the stage in a grand hall filled with attentive faces. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation as she began her address. "Thank you for having me here today," Angela started, her voice steady and clear. "I stand before you not just as an FBI agent, but as a person who has experienced firsthand the challenges and injustices that persist within our system. My story is one of struggle and resilience, but it is also a story of hope and transformation." She recounted the details of her encounter with Officer Henderson, emphasizing the broader implications of her experience. Angela spoke about the systemic issues that allowed such behavior to persist and the urgent need for comprehensive reforms. She highlighted the importance of accountability, transparency, and community engagement in addressing these challenges. "The road to justice is long and arduous," Angela continued, "but is a road we must travel together. Each of us has a role to play in shaping a system that is fair, equitable, and just. It is our collective responsibility to ensure that the voices of those who have been marginalized are heard and that their experiences lead to meaningful change." The audience was deeply engaged, many taking notes and nodding in agreement as Angela spoke. Her words resonated with a diverse group of attendees, each of whom brought their own perspectives and experiences to the conversation. The impact of her message was evident in the subsequent discussions and workshops, where participants explored ways to implement reforms and address systemic issues. Following her keynote, Angela participated in a panel discussion on law enforcement and community relations. The panel included representatives from various sectors, including police chiefs, policymakers, and community organizers. The conversation was lively and insightful, with each panelist offering their perspectives on the challenges and opportunities for reform. Angela found the discussion to be both enlightening and encouraging. The panelists shared their experiences and ideas, and there was a palpable sense of commitment to working towards positive change. The exchanges were candid and constructive, highlighting both the progress made and the areas that still needed attention. In the weeks after the conference, Angela continued to engage with various stakeholders and contribute to ongoing discussions about reform. She participated in roundtable discussions, wrote op-eds, and collaborated with advocacy groups to support legislative efforts aimed at improving law enforcement practices and addressing racial disparities. The impact of her advocacy was becoming increasingly visible. New policies were being introduced at both local and national levels, aimed at increasing accountability and promoting community police dialogue. Training programs for law enforcement officers were being revamped to include a focus on bias reduction and de-escalation techniques. The establishment of community oversight committees was gaining traction, providing a platform for citizens to have a voice in policing practices. Angela's efforts were also having a personal impact. She received messages of support from individuals who had been inspired by her story, as well as from those who had experienced similar challenges. These messages were a testament to the power of sharing one's experience and the difference it could make in the lives of others. One evening, Angela received a letter from a young woman named Laura who had been a student in a community outreach program that Angela had spoken to earlier in the year. Laura wrote about how Angela's story had inspired her to pursue a career in social justice and advocacy. "Dear Ms. Johnson," the letter began, "I wanted to thank you for sharing your story with us. Your bravery and dedication have inspired me to follow a path in social justice. I am currently studying criminal justice and hope to work towards creating a more equitable system. Your example has shown me the impact one person can make, and I am determined to contribute to that change." Angela was moved by Laura's letter. It was a reminder of the far-reaching effects of her work and the importance of continuing to advocate for justice. She responded to Laura, offering encouragement and expressing her pride in her decision to pursue a career in social justice. As the year drew to a close, Angela took some time to reflect on the progress made and the challenges ahead. The journey towards justice was ongoing, but the strides made were a testament to the collective efforts of those committed to change. Angela was proud of the work accomplished but remained aware that there was still much to be done. Her commitment to reform was unwavering, and she continued to work with determination and hope. The experience had strengthened her resolve and deepened her understanding of the complexities of the system. Angela knew that her role in the fight for justice was far from over, and she was prepared to face the challenges ahead with the same courage and conviction that had guided her through the darkest moments. As she looked ahead to the future, Angela felt a sense of optimism. The conversations, collaborations, and initiatives sparked by her experience were laying the foundation for a more just and equitable society. The path forward would undoubtedly be filled with obstacles, but Angela was ready to navigate them with resilience and dedication. The journey towards justice was a continuous one, shaped by the collective efforts of individuals who refused to accept the status quo. Angela's story was just one thread in the larger tapestry of change, and she was determined to continue weaving that thread into a powerful narrative of hope, courage, and transformation. With each step forward, Angela remained focused on her goal, to contribute to a world where justice and equality were not just ideals, but lived realities for all. The journey was far from over, but Angela was ready to face it with unwavering resolve, knowing that every effort, every voice, and every act of courage brought the world one step closer to a better future.